Hey, Huddlers, welcome back. I'm Pastor Mark, and I'm glad to see you here. And again, just remember, here's who we are in Huddle. It's like sports, right? You hear a word from the coach, you say, what's the game situation? What's the next play? And you go, break, let's run it. And so that's what we do with God's word in Huddle. We go, what's a word from our God? What's going on in our world, in our life, in our situation? And we go, how would God have us respond? How's He's inviting us to reach out with His truth? So I'm pretty excited about what we're doing here today. Last week, you started week 1 of My Faith Story with a fantastic chance to share some of those things going on in different seasons of your life. It was kind of cool, wasn't it? Today, we hit week 2 of it. And in week 2, we're continuing the exact same goal, right? God has said to us, what I give to you, my wisdom, my word, always be prepared to give an answer. Now, that right there is kind of interesting. And, that implies that God's word makes your life questionable. It's worth asking about. We'll talk about that another day, I'm sure. But how often should you be prepared to give an answer? The answer is always. And to whom should you be prepared to give an answer? Everyone who asks you to give the reason, and this is what makes you questionable, to give the reason for the hope that you have. That's what we're doing with My Faith Story, equipping you to know and to have something to say. What do you believe? Why do you believe? Now, this is week 2. Last week, like we said, you did that Seasons of Life worksheet exercise, and we learned that stories are connection. Hold on to that sheet. Bring it back next week. Today, we start going on to another exercise, Who's at Your Table? And we're going to continue to look at that story from John chapter 4. We'll talk about that as we go, but let's do this again. Here's how we open today. Always be prepared to give an answer. Always, like right now. So here's the thing. I'm going to set up a scenario. You are sitting with a friend at a table, at your house, at a restaurant. And they're going through a hard time. You're going through a hard time. The world is going through hard times. At least one of those is always true. Maybe all of them. Here's the scenario. Go around the right now and say, how would you respond to the next question? They come to you and they say, you're a Christian. You say, yeah. You go to church and believe in Jesus and stuff. Yeah. With all that's going wrong in the world, how can you have hope? I throw it back to you. Around your room right now, what are some of the things that happen? What do you say next? All right, welcome back. Now, last week you did that months of my life sheet, and that was setting you up for just kind of going, wow, what are the things that have happened and where have I been? Well, let's catch up to this month, right here now. Where are you? You are here. You are in the United States. If you're doing this, the congregation where I serve, you're at Peachtree City, Georgia, or you have this connection with this little old congregation in Peachtree City, Georgia. You are not only having that connection, you are doing this at a church thing. For some of you, that is completely normal. You've done church things all your life. For others of you, sometimes you're still catching up and going, I am doing a church thing. And not like just a show up at Christmas, Easter, or a worship service thing. I'm doing like a study thing, a huddle thing, whatever that means. And not just at doing a church thing, you're doing this connected with a Lutheran church. Again, for others of you, you're like, represented Lutheranism all my life. Others of you are going, I have had a interesting journey to this church thing at a Lutheran church. You can process that during some stuff that's going on in your life right now. What has brought you here? A job shift, a move. What's going on at this particular time of life? Some of the things are really good at this time of life. Some of the things are not making you smile as much. You are here. And the people that you are with, sometimes I think this is funny. If you look around, whether it's your huddle room right now or the crowd of people that you worship with, you go, would I know or be with these people if it wasn't this connection right here and right now? I often thought this, that the Church of God gathers people together in a way and with people that is extraordinary in this world. It joins us with people that we wouldn't connect with otherwise. Across political divides, across economic divides, across racial divides. The only thing that's doing that in our world is effectively the gospel of Jesus Christ. Otherwise, I don't see how the rifts that exist in our world could possibly be handled. So when we come to that happens to be the you are here, and there's a lot of people in that backstory. Now, here's what I want you to do. We started last week reading John chapter 4. I would like you to read it again because we're going to peel back even another layer in that story here today. Take a few minutes. It's a fairly long one. Break it up, paragraph by paragraph, or however you want to do it. Read John chapter 4, verses 4 to 26 on your handout. It's a good reading. It's a good reading and an impactful story every time. Let's just review these things that I briefly went over last week. We said, what happens in this story? And we learn a little bit about the way that Jesus witnessed, even about himself. And so we go, here's the first thing you have. You engage and enjoy the small talk. Jesus' story starts this way. Sure is hot. Hey, would you give me a drink? This is probably how almost every story that you're a part of starts. Every time you just kind of visit with people, and it's possible this is a lost art. How cool would it be if Christians regain the lost art of small talk instead of disappearing into the disengagement with people around us, into our phones or whatever else it might be. And so, engage the small talk. Resist the urge to argue. There are any number of times where this woman wants to go, oh yeah? How can you ask me for a drink? Do you think you're better than us? Oh, sure wish someone gave me this living water, right? She would argue, and there are no shortage of opportunities to argue in our world still to this day. But instead of arguing back, he invites greater depth. Ask the next question. Invite the deeper level of the conversation. People are thirsting for it. And then finally, we'll look closely at this woman here today. That's what we're going to do. She is a woman who desperately needs to have someone restore the reality of hope in her life. And that's where the story you just read left off. Now, when you read it, you had this little phrase that came up in there last week, and maybe you noticed it last week. If not, I'm going to linger on it this week. We are told that Jesus had to go through Samaria. Now, on one hand, that's just an odd thing right there. There is no Jew in the world in Jesus' day who would kind of go, have to go through Samaria. Their answer would be, no, I don't. A person never needs to go through Samaria. But let's just dig into that for a second. Notice this geographical detail, right? We know that, well, like I said, Jesus had to go through Samaria. That's what the text said. And then you go, okay, where's he at? He has been connecting with the things going on around John the Baptist. He's at a little town called Aenon, right there on the Jordan River where John is doing his thing. We know when we look ahead that he is heading to Galilee up in the north, closer to his hometown area. You can see where Nazareth and Cana are there on the map. He often gathers around Capernaum on the top of the lake. It's a great place to be. Now, if you were going to travel that route, going from Aenon to Galilee, just ask the question, did Jesus have to go through Samaria? The answer is no, and no Jew would on their own. The disciples, this surely wouldn't have been their idea to go through Samaria. They would go, that's where Samaritans live? And even just logically, you have to go out of your way because you would normally just go along the Jordan River where there is water, where there are roads, where there are friendly faces, because they're not there in Samaria. This woman, and the story that we see here, she is in a town called Sychar. Now, you just kind of lay it out there. Jesus, wait, what? Had to go through Samaria? And that's what we're going to look closely at right here and now. His had to is not for geographical reasons. We're simply told she's a Samaritan woman. And here are the details right on the surface of it that we know. She has had 5 husbands. And the one she has now is not her husband. She has one more man as well. On the face of it, it reads like a woman with very loose morals. You kind of go, oh, that is not a good storyline. So it's either that, like this woman gets around a bit. But I want you to think a little bit more contextually about it, especially the historical context. She is either a woman of very loose morals, but it's probably more likely she's a victim of immoral men. A woman in her day would not have had the option, right? A woman in those days was not necessarily counted as an equal. In fact, you watch the stories of Jesus, he greatly elevates the status of women. A woman in those days would have been accounted among the assets of the property. And so let's just go, what can we guess has happened to this woman? Well, maybe a husband has died, which has left her in a tough predicament. Maybe a husband has taken her and promised her the world, and instead of dying, he has sent her away, which leaves her in a worse predicament. And this hasn't happened just once. This hasn't happened twice. It has happened 3, 4, 5 times. Now, whatever other circumstances are going on there, what's the 6th guy like? The one that has taken her in now, promised her the world, using her, whatever else is going on, this woman's life is not good. Now, that's just talking about her relationship with the men in her world. Ask this question, what's her relationship with the women in her world? You would do this. Every woman in that day would have the task of helping manage and take care of the household, right? And one of those things that you would have to do is you would have to go, fetch the water daily. The daughters and the moms would go out there, the husbands and the sons, they would go out and start working the animals, work the crops. And so the women are going to go to the well and do this. Now, let's just ask this question. What time of day would you go to the well? Well, you need the water right away. And if you go in the morning, it's cooler. This is not an easy task. And would you do it alone if you had to? Well, you've seen it. What is one of the beautiful strengths of women? Connect with, support, encourage, check in with one another. I guarantee you that time at the well was something they looked forward to, and it wasn't just all about efficiency and saying, quick, get the water, I gotta get out of here. They would have enjoyed that time. But not this woman. What time of day do we know that she goes to the well? Well, the text says it there. It says, the 6th hour. Now, don't read that and say, oh, it was about 6 in the morning. No, because the 6th hour starts counting at sunrise. Let's say it's 6 a.m. If I'm not talking about the 6th hour in a day that counts hours starting at sunrise, this woman is going and drawing water at high noon. Now, you might say, whose choice is that? Is that her choice? Is that the choice of the man in her life? Is that the choice of the women that would say, you don't really belong with us, right? The women of the town aren't necessarily closely associating with her. She's that woman. Right? Is she cursed? Is there something wrong with her? Does she say or do something? So all that is just simply notice this is a bad storyline in every way. This woman is completely disadvantaged and marginalized. She has no connections. You know those kitchen sponges? Like the yellow sponge with green on one side of it that you use at a kitchen sink sometimes? And when you first buy them, they're soft and they're squishy and they feel good to your hand, wet or dry. But do you also know that same sponge after it's been used several times and maybe a month later, maybe longer, you find these in church kitchens sometimes. It's been just set up in the corner ahead of the sink, or maybe even worse, there's been set in a cabinet underneath it. That sponge that has been used many times, it's no longer soft, it's no longer pliable, it's like a brick. And actually, if you were to use that same sponge and rub it on things, it would be a bit abrasive. Well, the reason I say that is because this story from the Bible is kind of like that. Let's be honest about this Samaritan woman. Her life has been tough. She has been disadvantaged, she has been marginalized, she has been used, and she is dried out. And the result of it, and you see it in the interaction with Jesus, you got to be honest, she is neither open nor kind to him. But now feel the context of her life and her situation. We said that on the last slide. Here's what she's been through. It's some not good stuff. And now you come on this story where she, in the heat of the day, is going to go get her stinking water all by herself again. And here's what she finds. Walking out to the well, she finds, let me get this, she finds a foreign man from a demeaning culture. Right, we're told Jews did not associate with Samaritan. Jews were more likely to spit in the general direction of a Samaritan than to acknowledge their presence at all. A foreign man from a demeaning culture in the heat of the day, and she is alone in a remote area. This, again, is not a good situation, and she knows the challenges and dangers that can come for someone in her situation. And so she isn't kind, she's dismissive. And if she didn't need the water so badly, she would be smart and she would run away. Instead, she tries to stiff-arm this guy that she doesn't know anything about, right? And it's her phrases. She wants to argue. She wants to debate. Who are you to ask me for water? Where can I get this living water? If only somebody would help me. Do you think you're better than me? And all of those things come. Here's one of the spiritual truths. And the reason why you and I gather in things like huddles and Bible studies, one of the truths is she is a hurt person. And hurt people, well, they do this. If not softened by the grace of God, hurt people hurt other people. She has been a part of that storyline on both sides of the equation. So you know how I started this? By talking that Sychar, Samaria, this is a place that Jesus had to go. On the surface, this looks like a story talking about Jesus going to a well because he's just walked like a dozen miles and he's thirsty. This is a story about thirst, but it's not about Jesus' thirst. It's about hers, right? Because the bottom line is Jesus is about to offer living water so that she never thirsts, because where people are marginalized and stuck in ungrace, it is those places that Jesus has to go. These kind of relationships and interactions matter. That's what brings us now to this next exercise. You have this sheet in front of you called Who's at Your Table, right? So grab that sheet and look at it. And let me walk you through a couple things with it. It probably looks something like this. Right? Here's a couple Bible study points just to preface it. We're told this even in the Garden of Eden, even when everything is perfect. We're told that even in God's perfect creation, and I bet you can even fill in this blank. Genesis 2, perfect creation, God says in the midst of the relationship that is himself, he says, it is not good for the man to be, what goes in the blank? Yeah, alone. Alone's a bad place to be. That's why God puts people in your life. God's design has always been that you live and process life in relationships. That is what this sheet is. So here's what you have it, and here's how it goes. I'm going to give you a few minutes to work on this exercise. Do it like this. First, write your name in the center of the table. The table is you. Do that now. Okay? Now, your name's in the center of that table. And when you think through the story of your life, who's at your table? Who are the people that have made an imprint on your life that God has used to show you it's not good to be alone? I can bless you through these people I put in your life. And then what you're going to do for a few minutes now to remember, think about it, process it. You're going to write their name in the boxes around the table. You can fill in some of the boxes, all of the boxes, and then briefly a word or a phrase that captures their impact. Let me give you my brief reflections. One of the first names that I thought about was a man by the name of Ron Goodsman. Ron Goodsman believed in me. And to pause and think about that's kind of cool because I met him in college. He was a pastor who picked out me. And he invited me to come be a summer intern for him after my first year at seminary, right? So I'm 23 years old. What do I know at that point, right? Problem is, I think I know a lot, but that's a risk at 23. And I remember one night, I'm starting to get used to being a pastor, and I was preaching that coming weekend. And I was working late at night because I'm feeling the pressure. I'm starting to see myself. For a pastor, when you start seeing yourself in whether it's the collar or the robes, you realize you've signed up for a pretty big job. And the pressure wasn't working well for me. I was working on a message and I just couldn't get it to work like I wanted. It wasn't going well. And he must have seen my office light on late one night. And he came in my office and he just looks around and I must have just looked forlorn. I don't know what. But he goes, "You're done for the night. Come with me." Okay. And so I did. I walked with him and we walked out, just sat outside on the church steps there in a beautiful Iowa evening, not saying anything. And he, after a period of silence, looks at me and goes, "What are you counting your belly button lint? Are you navel gazing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm having a hard time." And he goes, "You've got this." But even when he said it, and that's what I wrote in my box, I wrote, Goodsman belly button lit on my box. And he does it with kind of a wink, right? "You got this. I believe in you." And he was there with me to get me over the hump and kind of going, "You are going to do this," and walked with me all through that internship at that time. I say that because that leaves an imprint on me. And when I went back to his funeral, maybe 5, 6 years ago now, one of the things I did on the evening, I just went back and sat on those steps and remembered the blessing that he was in my life. Now, that's what's going to happen here and now. Enjoy these few minutes while you are remembering the people that God has used to make an imprint, an impact on your life, and simply write their name and even a brief word or phrase that captures that impact. Take a couple minutes with that now. It's an enjoyable bit of reminiscing, isn't it? And maybe you still have things going through your head. I know when I was working on my list and writing some of the names that I have, um, I would put just a couple little bullet points with it. And I really only needed to write 1 or 2 words because I know the mental file that those things opened. I want you to take a moment. The Huddle community is an important piece of this puzzle. And take a few moments now and just one at a time sharing one person. More if you have time, make good use of this time. But Huddle Leader, if you would facilitate with this, take turns sharing a person at your table. And even think about this. You choose who you want to share. Whose name came to you immediately where you kind of go, I got to write them. I'm going to write them first. Why? And some of you, I don't know if you've thought about it like this as you were going around the table. Were all the names that you wrote that left an imprint on you positive influences? Were there any negative influences that helped you learn something about God's grace? That's another angle that a person might take. I think it's probably unlikely you started there. But the question that you would say is, 1, share the person. What impact did they have on you? And how did God use this person to shape your faith? If you have time at the very end, or even maybe just in your own reflections, you would think, this is your table. Someone else, who would write your name at their table? That's ultimately where this witness is going. But of course, we'll talk about that more next week. And again, next week, let me do this reminder. Bring back both of the exercises that you've done next week. Bring back the Seasons of Life worksheet, the Who's at Your Table worksheet. Even if you brought some of these Bible study points, you can do that. And next week, we're going to put this together where you say, God has given me something to say to answer the question, here's why I have hope in this life. But go ahead and finish now with that little bit of sharing, and God bless your discussions, your reflections, and your reminiscing. God's peace be with y'all.